Alright, gang, this one's been kind of a long time coming. I mentioned in my last video in this series that I already knew what the next one was going to be, and I did, and I still do, and it's the same one I was planning way back then. But I just kind of put it off, but finally I think it's time for Wack Attack number 4. And this one, I do believe, is not only the wackest yet, but probably the wackest thing I will ever cover. I think any Wack Attacks after this, I'm sure there are plenty of crazy, whack, fun stuff to talk about in the show and do future videos on, but I don't think I'll ever get worse than this. Because maybe they weren't even trying to make it, I'd say they definitely weren't even trying to make it dope or good, or that would definitely definitely be the issue. But yet it's not, I'm not going to do a joke thing, I'm not going to do, like Rappin' Rodney or anything like that where it's a gimmick, or, a comedy album where he's rapping or something like that. This is a legitimate release by a legitimate hip-hop artist, sold legitimately for real money to his fans, including me. And that certainly taught me a lesson. In fact, before I get into what this album is, I'm going to talk about some good albums that this is not. You guys might not follow me on this, but I happen to be a pretty big fan of a lot of the early Anticon stuff, and even a few of their contemporary releases, not so much as I've drifted away from hip-hop, but, they still got some talented artists either down on the label or they're sort of associates with the label. Doseone was an MC who's down since day one. He's one of the founding members and one of the co-owners of the label, and however that kind of jazz works. And he is really, really talented. Whatever you think of his styles, because, they do sort of very abstract stuff. They do sort of non-traditional hip-hop, so I know, a lot of heads are just going to kind of walk away from it. He's got a weird voice, he's got a weird delivery. So I can totally understand if you don't follow with me on, like, oh, I'm a fan of his stuff. But I think he's definitely undeniably a talented songwriter, really dope lyricist, vocalist. He often has some really great production, thanks to guys like Gel, who's sort of his most common partner, and as well as some other guys from Anticon and stuff like that, and collaborators. So he's done lots of good stuff for a lot of years. I've known him sort of, I guess, since I sort of found the whole 45 Below / Anticon thing in the 90s. I was blown away by him then. I'm still often impressed by the kind of stuff he does. But one thing he did in the late 90s is he formed a group called Subtle. What Subtle is him as the lead vocalist, and it's Gel, who's his partner from them / themselves, and sort of, again, one of his regular producers, who's a really great, talented producer, but now with a lot of live instrumentation, a live band. And they first came on the scene in 2001 on Doseone's own label, Purple 100 or whatever the hell it's called, and they released a series of EPs. And they're all seasonal. So you've got, this was the first one, it's summer, autumn, winter, and spring. And now Subtle, as much as Doseone might sort of already be non-traditional hip-hop, Subtle is even further removed. Like, they're definitely sort of an experimental, emo, not necessarily rock, I was going to say, but sort of a pop music fusion with hip-hop. It's still definitely hip-hop in some ways, but still very far removed from it in other ways. So again, even if you're sort of a Doseone fan, and it's strictly hip-hop stuff, like Crowns Down or Hemispheres, I can see you sort of saying, okay, I like that, but I'm not such a fan of Subtle. This is not knocking Subtle as a band. There's some really talented stuff. There's some really good songs. You have to be a bit more in the mood for, or at least I have to be a bit more in the mood for it as a hip-hop head, to be, in the mood to embrace the non-strictly hip-hop stuff. But there's some really good songs in here, some really good lyrics, some really good production. And this is, Subtle's first stuff. They went on to do a lot more albums, and they signed to Lex Records and stuff like that, and maybe in some ways they've probably improved. So this is their first stuff, a little bit weaker, but Doseone, again, already a really seasoned artist. Gel, already a seasoned producer. So, there's some pretty quality stuff here. Spring was good, fall was good, summer was good. Did I skip over winter? I sure did. This album is insane, and it's insanely awful, which is why it is my selection for Wack Attack. This is their third one in the series, and it is uniquely, exceptionally whack. First of all, it is chiefly instrumental. which is fine. There's some dope hip-hop stuff. It's not necessarily my thing. I don't usually listen to a lot of instrumental hip-hop albums, but I can certainly recognize dope production and quality and stuff like that. But on the same time, not only does it not have like really vocals and lyrics to it, it doesn't really have music to it. So it's sort of an instrumental album that is not even instrumental. It is, these were all CD only, based on his own label again, Purple 100. And the rest are kind of standard EPs. They're like 6, 7, 8 songs. Again, up and down. A couple songs are really good. A couple feel a little bit more like filler. This right here is one song, 38 minutes. So one 38-minute track of no vocals and essentially no music. I just got to give you a taste of it, and then we'll come back. So it takes a long time to get going, right? Except it just goes on like that, and there is nothing else but more of this. More, I guess they're going for ambiance. I mean, I could sort of see it as sort of like background to a movie, not even like a movie soundtrack, because the music never, picks up, it never lulls, it never really conveys any emotions. It's really just sort of more like background noise, like sound effects with some vague hints of music to it. And that's all it is for the whole album. And no warning, from Doseone or the group or anything. I mean, again, Doseone had a lot of stuff. He was an established artist. This was the third in the series. So let's face it, a lot of fans, myself included, but I doubt I'm alone in this, were really just buying these as soon as they were announced. Subtle. New EP. Blam. Order online from his website. Get from a show. Whatever. Haven't heard it. Don't need to hear it. He's a really talented artist. He always does something interesting, convincing. Buy it. Take it home. And as Craig G said, take it out, makes you want to break your tape deck. But it's just, I only listened to it once and I put it away until I took it out again for this video. Just to remind myself, because I kept thinking in the back of my mind, maybe it's not as bad as I sort of remember it. Maybe it's more, it's atmospheric, it's musical, but it's, sort of soundtrack. No, just listen through the whole thing. It never gets... It actually, at lots of points, it gets far less musical and just more like random noises. Now, my understanding is that they recorded this live, or, not live like some of his live albums in front of an audience or anything, but recorded it all in one go in the studio, all improvised, which should tell you a lot. So they just basically started and went for 38 minutes, stopped, and called it an album. Let's compare it to some other hip-hop now, shall we?
best. Unleashed upon menace of mankind for preaching and teaching the truth to the deaf and blind. But negative brothers, you know Shabazz don't bother. Most brothers strive, but I strive harder. These are actual facts, the dominant black. I'm writing exact. I can't attain my brother.
Now you want a rematch, history repeated. What are you stupid having lost all your senses? A mind for being behind barbed wire fences. You know what I'm talking about, remember? You told me you were there since the middle of December. Where it's still, well if your memory's still, let me refresh it. Suffolk County Jail.
Flow like water in a drain pipe on the street, cause the break beat make feet move and pep step, cause I want my rep kept. My actions are drastic, test and press it on plastic. If my job was a rock, you'd be stuck in the glass stick.
Again, I just gotta tell you guys, if you haven't heard Subtle or anything like that, the rest of his albums are not like this. The rest of the Subtle EPs are not like this. I mean, again, they might not be your cup of tea, they might not be the greatest to you, they might not even be the best Subtle material, but they're nothing like this. They're actual music. There are bits where there's sort of like, ambient, interludes, or sort of the music kind of takes its time to build up or something, where Doseone is doing something that's not necessarily strictly rapping, he's kind of vocalizing and stuff like that. There are certainly moments like that, but nothing like this Winter EP. So then after the Subtle EPs all came out, the last one wasn't Winter, the last one was Spring, but after all four came out, then they signed Alex, they did some other stuff, and then in 2004, I believe, they released this album right here, Earthsick, which is a compilation of the best of the four previous EPs. Now, you might disagree with their taste on any particular songs. Probably if I was compiling the best from those EPs onto one album, I might pick slightly different, but basically I think they're right. I think they do generally pick most of the best material. And they kind of weed out a lot the whacker stuff. So for most people, I think you can really just kind of get Earthsick and skip the EPs. And the EPs are, still have some exclusive material though for the hardcore fans. But of course the question is, what did they do about Winter? Yes, Winter's on here. They're grouped up in clumps. So, you have like 4 songs from Winter, 4 songs from Autumn. At the end, 4 songs from Winter. This time they push it to the end wisely, I think, because you can't really have music, dead space music. So they saved the dead space for the end. There's 4 tracks, which are much, much yours, not like 38 minutes. Some are like 2 minutes. I think one is like 6 minutes of just more of the same. But not, interestingly, exactly the same. If you pay attention, and I did for the sake of this video, and what I found is that the Winter tracks on here, although still, again, no vocals, no lyrics, no music, just ambient noise, are different. They made 4 new Winter selections, 4 new pieces. The rest are all exactly the same songs copied off of those EPs and just pasted onto here. They didn't just cut out chunks of Winter. I guess it's such a masterpiece you could never just play, parts of it without playing the whole thing, God forbid. So they recorded all new Winter selections, which are exactly the same in spirit of what they are, but they're actually, different. I mean, this features like, at one point there's a sample that you'll recognize from a Reaching Quiet song. Another point you'll hear a dial tone, which just kind of goes on for a long time. I mean, that's what you're buying into when you're listening to Winter from Subtle. But it is different. There's actually a little tiny vocal sample in one of the first songs on here, the first Winter songs. That's not on the other one. So it is different, but more of the same. So again, I am prepared to give Winter and Subtle in general some slack. You know what I mean? Like when I played Tone Deaf, that was just whack hip-hop in its purest form. This is, at least you could say, not strictly hip-hop. Not trying to keep the same aesthetics. I did that comparison earlier. They're obviously not necessarily trying to be like in Shabazz or anything else. They're definitely going for their own thing. Trying to be different and experimental, and you could say it's a failed experiment, but they're trying to be different, and that's certainly what this is. But there's really, even cutting them that slack, I mean, there's just nothing to, like, I can't imagine revisiting this intentionally. I can't imagine not being really fucking pissed off. That's what I learned from this, is that as much as a fan as I am of artists, and Doseone specifically, never blind buy. Never just trust them. That's what they taught me. Is they said, because Doseone had to know what he was doing when he was putting this out. He had to, right? So you had to say, as much as you like this guy, you can't just buy his stuff without hearing it first. A lot of people were, and maybe some people still are, God bless them, but you really just can't anymore. It's just, what if there's another winter, And he has other interesting projects, like he did a poetry book and CD, which is all a cappella, and certainly that's the sort of thing you would definitely want to listen to first before you buy. But at least there's still more objective merit to it. I mean, I'm not a fan of that particularly, but I could see why you'd want to get it. It's more poetry than hip-hop. You're certainly alerted to the fact well in advance of it coming out that it was more poetry than hip-hop. The problem is this was the third in a series, and the first two series were much more, again, subtle is different than themselves or some of his other, or Green Think or other Doseone projects, but they were established music. They were established good quality stuff, good songwriting, good instrumentation, and it's just lost here with no warning. So you're just buying it as part of a series, and then woof, threw away money. Although I'm sure there are collectors who do want this. I actually do see this going for some pretty high prices on eBay and things, because these were kind of limited. Again, these were just self-put out on Doseone's own label. And I get that this is probably just meant to be like ambient background music. I get that, I mean, I can't imagine just strictly paying attention to all 38 minutes of this unless you've been in a motorcycle accident or something. Like, it's really, you can't just sit and listen to it. It has to be background music, but it doesn't even add anything as background ambient music. If you have it in the background, you know what I mean? Like, if you're playing games or reading or something, you don't get any kind of swelling emotions or feelings or anything. It's just generic background noise. It's like leaving your window open at night. Except even that has, I'm sure evokes a lot more, feelings and memories and, whatever interesting sounds you might hear from your window at night. I mean, I guess that's the idea. This is your window open at night in winter. But God forbid you're expecting a decent album or anything like that. This is whack. I've given it so much, I've cut it so much slack. And at the end of the day, even with all of that, it's junk. I got it. I put it away. I took it after this video. It's going back away forever. I doubt I'll ever listen to this again. I also doubt I'll ever listen to the last 4 tracks of this again. I might use this as a quick little shorthand for the other EPs, but you definitely turn it off before you get to track 11, I think. But anyway, I just wanted to share that with you guys. Probably the absolute wackest album by a legitimate hip-hop artist. Again, no, goofy, I'm rapping Duke, Mel Brooks kind of silliness where it's not really a rap album. I have some crazy stuff like that. But this is a legitimate artist putting it out, selling it to the public. Like, here it is. Here's my art. Here's my dope quality album. And blam. Wackest one, I believe, ever. So, and that's it. Thanks for watching. Peace out.